I watched a video a while ago that claimed that playing sports is something Christians should not engage in. I always feel impelled to speak out against unscriptural prohibitions. You may be like I was wondering to yourself, where in Scripture are people getting this stuff from? I will discuss them one at a time, starting with James chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. The idea presented is that athletic competition comes from people's sinful desires. Let me first of all say that the above can be true. But to say that it is always true is simply fallacious. I will elaborate more on this later. In Galatians 5 it mentions the works of the flesh, and verse 20 reads, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, strife, jealousy, wrath, selfishness, divisions, heresies. Again, hatred, strife, jealousy, wrath, and selfishness can exist in sports, but to say they always exist in sports is false. Later in Galatians chapter 5, it mentions the fruit of the Spirit. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, self-control. The idea here is that you cannot show love, gentleness, or meekness when you are competing with another. The problem with this argument is that it discounts the fact that competitors know injury and losing the competition are possible. My earlier objections also stand true for this claim. Next, Galatians chapter 5 verse 26 reads, let us not be desirous of vain glory, provoking one another, envying one another. Christians can pursue glory as long as it's not vain, meaning they are not prideful in such a pursuit, without the intent of provoking or envying others. Let me say the prior things mentioned are important to remember and display in sports, but also apply to all other areas of life. You can find all the prior negative traits evident in Christian gatherings as well. Thankfully, they are not always present, and would not be a good reason to condemn such gatherings. Some who condemn sports like to get creative with words and declare the competitors are actually your enemies. As one who has done sports for many years, I can tell you I have never considered my competitors as enemies. Anyone who does needs to get that thought out of their head. One sport I want to focus on is martial arts. As one who has trained and competed in martial arts, I have intimate knowledge and experience in this sport. First of all, the word martial is not really applicable today as it comes from Mars, the Roman god of war. Some martial arts styles were used in war, but not anymore. Some were only created as sports, but are called martial arts nevertheless. Some aspects of martial arts, such as calling someone master or bowing, are condemned. First of all, bowing to a person or object does not mean one is worshiping it. Worship is about primary devotion, not bowing. King David bowed before objects and people, but never worshipped them. For example, then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord, the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. And, "I will bow down toward your holy temple and will praise your name." So bowing in martial arts is intended to be done out of respect. Some martial arts have instructors called masters. Jesus said, "Neither be you called masters, for one is your master, even Christ." Quite simply, this is about people being proud with their titles. So calling someone master or being called that is not wrong unless that person is being the object of pride. What about the fact of injuring others? How can you love someone while punching or choking them? Commands about loving one another are in place so that we do not view people with hatred or harm them out of hatred. Performing martial art techniques simply to win a competition does not qualify as hatred. One extreme objection is that by playing sports you can end up associating with ungodly people. While seeing as though Jesus associated with ungodly people, one can hardly make such an objection. If you wanted to avoid ungodly people, you would have to leave this world. Do sports at least harness an opportunity for the works of the flesh to come out? No, because the spirit and the flesh are constantly at work with each other, regardless of what activity we are engaged in. I would like to end with telling you who my favorite athletic competitor of all time is. He wrestled long before I was born, and his name is Yahweh. Listen to his athletic competition. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with human beings, and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. So in this account, Yahweh took on flesh, engaged in wrestling, and purposely injured his competitor's hip when he saw he could not out-wrestle him. So not only does God not condemn sports competition, but he engages in them himself. So while it's perfectly alright to engage in athletic competition, we should always make sure it is done in the right spirit.